Hello everyone, you're listening to Celebrating Cinema, a podcast for the love of cinema. I'm your host, Elliot Bloom, and if you love what we do here, you can show your support by leaving us a review on whichever platform you listen to us. It really does help other fellow cinema lovers find us. I'm very happy to announce that for our next film club screening on the 11th of December will be Francis Ford Coppola's One from the Heart. This big, bold, brash musical from Francis Ford Coppola, which will coincide with our upcoming episode about big megalomaniac films, where we'll be discussing these big swings from directors that are often at the time never well received, but in hindsight might reveal something we were missing all along. This will also include an introduction from our very own Hugo Amazel. We really can't wait to see you there. You can find a link for tickets in the show notes. Before we begin this episode, please be advised that the following conversation does include discussions about sexual violence. If you are unable to listen to this, I still would encourage you to watch Shiori Ito's powerful documentary, Black Box Diaries, a deeply moving and courageous account of one woman's fight for justice and truth. In Black Box Diary, Shiori shares her harrowing experience of being raped by Noriyuki Yamaguchi, a powerful and influential media executive who had connections to high-ranking figures, including former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe. In a culture where discussions of sexual violence are often suppressed, Shiori's decision to speak out sparked a movement that would resonate far beyond her own story. Her journey sheds light on Japan's archaic laws surrounding sexual violence, which makes it extremely difficult for survivors to come forward. Black Box Diaries also offers a stark critique of the patriarchal systems that have long shielded powerful men from accountability. It's a story of one journalist's relentless pursuit of truth, but also a deeply personal account of a woman rebuilding strength, navigating cycles of trauma and healing, and the importance of solidarity in the face of injustice. All topics I discuss with Shiori. Hi Shiori.
Hi.
Welcome to Celebrating Cinema.
Thank you.
It's a real honour to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
On this podcast, we always start with the tradition of asking our guests their first memory of film, and I wondered what yours was.
Wow. First memory of film. I think that's my Never Taught to Love.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
And what is it about that film that stays with you, or
I just always dreamed to live in such a
magical life?
Magical house where I always believe that makuro kurosuke, I don't know how it was called in English, but this, black little dusty creature is somewhere. So I remember I always tried to look for it because I knew only special kids can see it or something. So I remember trying to find that in my house.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And you're a filmmaker, but I'd say more primarily you're a journalist. And I wondered where sort of this ambition to first want to be a journalist came from. In the documentary, we see a great snippet of you as a child presenting your own version of the news.
Yes. If I have 3 hours, I want to tell everything about it. But long story short, I had an opportunity to study abroad 1 year in Kansas. Quite in the middle of nowhere, middle of the United States of America. And I was 16 years old. I didn't know anything about Kansas. I grew up watching MTV, Laguna Beach, OC. So I always thought about, oh my gosh, I'm going America, thinking about California or New York. But when I landed there, I realized that it's such a, my classmate never left Kansas, most of them. And they're like, oh, which part of, you're from Japan, which part of China you're from, sort of the thing. So I just really realized that how information can shape people when I start watching news. And I think that was the time when I start, thinking about that would be a great profession to do. And also I'm very ADHD, so I thought, I can travel. I am okay with, being new place, meeting new people. Since then, I always dreamed to be a journalist.
And I think this idea of your search for the truth is very clear in Black Box Diaries, and I think often at times you're more loyal to that duty rather than yourself sometimes in the film. I don't know if that's fair to say, but we can perhaps start with the premise of the film Black Box Diaries, which is about a rape that you suffered. And if you could explain a bit, maybe a step back of your experience as a woman in Japan, because there are a lot of similarities across cultures of living under a patriarchal structure. But I think it's important to first set the conditions of what you were growing up in or what you faced as a woman at the time.
Yeah, well, so I was, born and raised in Japan and Tokyo. And it's just growing up in Tokyo. Well, I was actually from a city next to Tokyo called Kawasaki. But I mean, you almost always have to use train as a kid. And that's unfortunately most likely your first experience of sexual assault.
Yeah, you were talking a bit about your experience on the train as a woman and sort of this sense of silence that people often witness a lot of sexual assault around them, and as yourself as a woman, and you also said men, it's something that's very common. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that, but also something that you mentioned in the documentary is that only 4% of sexual assaults are even reported to police. Could you perhaps share why that is?
I just have to be honest. What I felt when I found out, first of all, we have 110 years old rape law and how difficult it is to report. I didn't even know that we had such a medieval, rape law, and also I had to reenact with lifestyle. And then I started realizing, of course, it's clearly the law wouldn't protect you, and you have to go through this re-traumatizing experience at the police station. Why would you report? What's the point, But again, for me, I think as a journalist, I start questioning these things.
Yeah.
Whoa, this is news to me. I was embedded in this very patriarchal, sexist society, but I didn't even know how it is to be like. So I just start questioning these things towards the investigator, prosecutors, and that was the way I think I could survive through my experience, just treating like I'm covering a story about someone who was raped.
And that's very clear in the documentary. I think one thing that particularly struck me though is you also mentioned it in the documentary of how often victims are stereotypically considered weak or sad or too depressed to do anything. And I think what was most moving about this is also a journey of you building back your power that has been taken away, and the fact that you have suddenly become more powerful through this experience in a way that I think nobody could expect. But I think it also shows the power of just simply sharing your story, and I wondered how you felt about that.
Oh, I'm happy you found me stronger because, up and down I was. And I think that's how trauma works. It's never be a perfect, you never feel like great.
Yeah.
I mean, many people say to me, and you often hear in the society, just forget about it, move on.
Yeah.
But these trauma, and it's not just about sexual violence trauma, any trauma, you just have to live with it. It will never gonna go away from you. You may be able to have some distance sometimes, but it will always come back to you. So I think the key was to me to be truthful to myself, how I want to live. And for me, asking question about this issue was one of the way that I could feel like I could survive. So there should be many way to survive in each person. And for me, was to ask question. For me, to try to find the truth that I couldn't seek through authorities.
I find it funny that in the film you didn't consider yourself an activist, and yet to make a film is a very activistic thing to do. But it also at the same time, you make a decision to make the film very personal, which I believe is a bit different to your approach with the book that you wrote before that, which was more journalistic. Could you share why you also felt it was important to be as personal as you could be? Because I felt also throughout the documentary, you became more vulnerable with yourself or with the audience.
Now I consider myself, I am hardcore
You
activist. In the end of the day,
Yeah.
at that time, I just didn't believe that activism and journalism could coexist. I felt like that is taboo things to. I mean, that was the struggle as a filmmaker because I was journalist first, and it meant that I had to cross the line as a journalist to tell my own story, which is taboo to do in journalistic world. So, I was start thinking like maybe I should interview the perpetrator to start with. I felt like I shouldn't maybe use any footage that I was talking to the camera. But then in the end of the day, I just had to come back to the director chair as a filmmaker thinking, if I were making someone else's story, what I do. And I also I couldn't separate myself as a journalist and survivor. This whole project of filmmaking was try to come back to myself, meaning, I'm not just a survivor, I'm not just the victim, I'm not just a daughter, I'm not just a sister, journalist, it's all of that. So to be able to face that, I had to be vulnerable to myself and also breaking the ideal perfect victim. I want to show all of it.
I think that vulnerability to yourself translates because, as I was saying before, I found myself crying at times watching it. And I think the most touching moment for me actually was when you visit these 3 women who are on the streets fighting for you. And
yes.
There was something about how they were out there and they meet you and they don't even realize that it's you, that they're in person. And there was something about how your story could touch these people so much that they were there also on the streets. And then that scene is followed up by you giving a talk to other female Japanese journalists. And that was also felt like this safe moment of sharing, and where you say often that when you talk about these things, you feel naked about it. And that was the first moment where you felt like you were covered in blankets and support, which I think speaks to sort of the solidarity, the sense that even though you as an individual had to speak up and kind of go on this journey by yourself of fighting against the system, you couldn't have done it with all these people that were there to support you. And I think that's something very strong in the film. And I wonder, how do you feel now about talking about these things? Is it still a challenge for you? I'm sure it is.
It is a challenge. I think I found more ways to talk about it. I found more words to talk about it, but it never get easy. Especially this year as I've been traveling to show this film all over the world, it's challenging. And every time I had some breakdowns this year, but always I come up with a new coping method. Like one time this year I did Vipassana.
Yes, I've done that as well.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Wow, I don't meet many people who've done it. 10 days of silent meditation.
It's very powerful.
It's something I needed. So I find the way to, face myself, to come back to myself all the time. But it's hard.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Especially we still have a bit of pushback against this story in Japan. We don't have any distribution chance back in Japan. And so more I feel like I get exposed outside, I again feel more distance away from my own home. It's painful.
I can imagine.
But I believe in storytelling. I'm optimistic once, like this opportunity as well, talking to you, it will be able to reach back to Japan. Someday, I wish.
Has there been any talk of judicial reform at all, or is that still an ongoing?
There were some update around our 110 years old notorious rape law. So now finally male victim can claim the rape before it was only for women.
Ah.
I know. And age of consent was updated from 13 years old, which was crazy,
Yeah.
to 15. Yeah, so, baby
Slow,
steps, but
slow,
yes, it's happening. But we have to push it through more. Consent doesn't really consider, our current rape law. So I really wish I can bring back this film and we'll open up the conversation.
I hope so too, because this was international production, right?
Yes.
And what was that process like? Did you first try to get help within Japan, or was it quite clear already that was going to be a struggle for this story?
So how it happened was actually I had to move away from Japan after I went public because I got many threats and
Gosh.
online troll.
Yeah.
But the way I moved away was because I got in touch with my producer, Hannah Akbeling. She's Swedish, who was living in London. She had a Japanese friend, and both of them just called me in 2017, said, why don't you just try to come to live with us? You can just stay with, one of our places. And I just decided to take the opportunity. We didn't, of course, talk about filmmaking, but I slowly told her, this is what I want to do. And we didn't have any support, but she just decided to come back and support. So, working as a journalist, you are quite independent. I feel like the work is, with yourself, sometimes as the editor, but making film takes a village. And
yeah, it does.
In that way, it was really supportive process for me to face this story. So I was just so lucky that I could meet someone who was willing to help outside of Japan. Yeah. And I think that was needed because sometimes it's really hard to create or talk about issue within your own community. So I think, we are production of Japan, US, and UK, and I think it had to be that way.
When you talk about journalism again and sort of this individual role as a journalist, another scene that really struck me is one of the final scenes at the end where the perpetrator of your rape, who I have to say again was had a close tie to the former Prime Minister of Japan and was a highly influential person. After the civil case where you were given the victory in it, he gives this press conference. And as he's talking about it, the camera pans to you in there, which I've just found remarkable because you're there working as a journalist and you're hearing his words. And there's some of the most bizarre words you could imagine, because I think he talks about how he suffers PTSD because you suffer PTSD, that something happened but it wasn't illegal. And you see you as a journalist trying to fight to remain professional but yet still registering what he was saying. And I was first wondered why it was important for you to be in the room at the time to hear that, and what it was like to hear that at that time.
I didn't know if I can stay there mentally, but I had an amazing friend of mine, journalist friend of mine, who was sitting next to me. So if I have any panic attack, they would help me. But before going to the room, at the press conference room, people who set up the press conference kind of start questioning, is it okay for you to be there? But it was like a foreign correspondent club. And then someone said, no, she is a journalist. She has all rights to be there. And that was, I think, more than I couldn't compare. Of course, we had a victory for the court case in the end. But for me, that was the moment I felt I survived it through. That was the moment for me that I could share and tell people that I survived it. He tried to crush me in many ways, but for me, getting off from not being able to work as a journalist was the worst thing that could happen to me. So I just wanted to be there to be able to report and to show that it's okay, that you to face your own case as well to the world. And so for me, that was one of the most remarkable moment of my life. I wouldn't do that again, but
But you did it.
I did it.
And this has been 8 years of your life. I think probably it's something that you'll continue fighting for, I hope, for a long time. But what is next for you as a journalist and as a filmmaker?
This is my first feature film.
Yeah.
I've been only making TV docs and short docs before, but I just can't wait to make other feature-length documentary, which is not about myself.
Yeah.
It's just also because I really felt that it's so strong when you can share in cinema. I never met my audience because, you know, I can't just jump into someone else's living room, you know, hearing what they think about it. So it's great that it's stronger in a way. So I do want to do more of making feature-length documentary.
Well, I'm sure we can't wait to watch that.
Thank you.
I know you get told it all the time, and I think perhaps sometimes when people tell you it, it runs out of meaning, but you are an icon. But I think simply because you shared a story that you were brave enough to share, and I think that translates to a way where I hope other people will be able to share their stories and see the power in sharing their stories, because you've started something that I think you couldn't have imagined, but here you are.
I just want to really encourage people who has trauma that they all can do this, you know. They have their, it's very powerful when you can tell your own story. It helps you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Arigato.
If you found this conversation powerful and enlightening, a testament to Shiori Ito's relentless spirit in the search of truth and justice, then there's nothing left but to go and watch the film. You can find tickets for Black Box Diaries in our show notes. If you want to stay connected with us at Celebrating Cinema and Lab, follow us at Lab111 on Instagram and Letterboxd. Check out our latest episode on the films of German director Wim Wenders, or listen back to another interview with director Rich Pepiat and his brilliant film Kneecap. If you love what we do, support us by leaving a review on your podcast platform. It really does help. This was the Lab 111 production, edited and produced by myself, Elliot Bloom, music from Hugo Amazal, and artwork from Studio FFF.